So this next tweet here is a named tweet. This is called Infantilization Engine. It's a pretty conceptual tweet, but I will work with you and with myself to get it out. Infantilization Engine. So the machine starts with us stating this about ourselves: I'm a victim. And then we have this modifier, abundance. When we have abundance in our lives, we see this thing about being a victim, being a loser, and the abundance is everyone gets a trophy. And then we have insulation. When everyone gets a trophy and everyone wins, you have this thing, insulation. Criticism is hate. But then you also have, on the other side of abundance, we have scarcity. And in scarcity, the opposite of abundance, not everyone gets a trophy. So then we turn to emotion, pathos. Our first thought is perhaps hate is why. Because if criticism is hate and not everyone gets a trophy, hate could be the reason. Probably could be the reason, right? So then we turn to ethos. We turn to morals and ethics and a choice, moral choices, ethical choices. And the person says, I'm disassociating from hate. I won't be in the group that hates. I won't be identified as that hate group. But criticism is hate in this scenario. It continues here. And this is all the machine. This is step by step from ethos to association. And we say, we are the oppressed. So we are being criticized. We are being hated. So we are the oppressed. And finally, projection. You're a victim. You're a victim. So it's a cycle. It begins with I'm a victim and turns into others are victims, because we have empathy and we also tend to project what we feel internally on the outside world. It's just not everybody does it to the same degree or the same level, but we all have this tendency to see ourselves in others. We love it when others mirror us, and others love when we mirror them. We're a very monkey see, monkey do species in the end. So Infantilization Engine, I would definitely check out the tweet on Twitter so you can see the formatting for it. And it makes a little bit more sense to visualize the tweet that way, but I will walk through it again. So it starts with this victim mentality. Now on this channel, Jeff Tidwell, we like to advocate for individual agency and personal strength, individuality, and a personal journey towards enlightenment and finding our blind spots, our merits, our flaws, and just looking at us as individuals, human beings, and not looking at us by the group that we're in. We're not winners, we're not losers, we're not in any group by immutable characteristics. We judge by character on this channel, what we all bring to the table and who we are. Not our identity, but our actions. Our actions should define us more than any sort of immutable characteristic, anything we can't change. Actions are something that we enact in tangible reality. So that's where I like to get us started. And I don't like to appeal to third-person effect on this channel. I don't like to assume I know what other people are thinking. So I'm not making any sort of specific, I'm not saying that everybody acts the way that people in Infantilization Engine do. I am just making a broad statement about victim mentality and how we can see ourselves as victims, and that can hold us back. So I'm a victim, and then you get into this abundance culture of everyone gets a trophy. So everyone wins. There's no meritocracy. If you do well, you get a trophy. If you do poorly, you get a trophy. And this is the sort of equality or equity that you find in the modern religion of social justice, this sense that, hell, if we're all even, if there's no contrast between those that succeed and those that have failed by, for their own reasons, for their own merits or flaws, or if it's just bad luck, or if somebody else has screwed them, however they do, if everybody wins, no matter how well they do in the situation, no matter what challenges they face, no matter what pushback they receive from the world, the outer world inertia pushing against them. I talk about that a little bit in my tweet, Free Willy, my video as well. Check it out on BitChute. Actually, no, it's not Free Willy. Check out that video as well, but it's a video called How Do We Measure Intelligence? How Do We Measure Intelligence has a little bit about how outer world inertia versus our inner world agency can determine in some ways how intelligent we are. It doesn't rely on certain proxies, like, for example, people like to talk about IQ. I don't think IQ is a perfect proxy or the only proxy by any stretch of the imagination for intelligence. There's emotional intelligence. There's so many other forms of intelligence that have nothing to do with IQ. So it doesn't matter how intelligent you are, how lucky you are, how much merit you have, how many flaws you or I may have. In an abundance, everyone gets a trophy. So with abundance comes this sort of insulation from reality. You don't get to see the downside of things. You don't get to see the darker hues, the darker tint of what the world has to offer. Because you have things. You have things. If it's an abundant culture, if you have abundant goods and resources, there's no sense of what the downside is. There is no downside. So you're insulated from criticism when everyone gets a trophy. And in that sense, criticism becomes hate. Criticism becomes hate. And it's such a contrast to what you've, in this insulated environment, expect. This safe space, this culture of nice, where everyone wins. Of course, any contrast to that sticks out. Any contrast to the culture of nice, which we talked about in last week's tweet video, it totally sticks out. So then you get hit with the world, the reality of the world, which is scarcity. We live in a world of scarcity. We don't have infinite resources. That is a fantasy, of course. And so we have this reality where not everyone gets a trophy. And that's just the way that it is. Not everyone gets a trophy. There are winners and losers, especially in a capitalistic world, a meritocratic world. There has to be a loser. It's all about mitigating your losses, folks. We're all going to lose a lot. But Scott Adams has a book called How to Fail at Almost Everything and Still Win Big. How to Fail at Almost Everything and Still Win Big. And he talks about how you can lose 99 battles and still win the war. It's just about mitigating losses and knowing which battles to choose and so on and so forth. Definitely check it out. But not everyone gets a trophy. And so then we go into pathos, which is emotion. We talk about that in one of my other videos, Kelp Me, Kelp You. That's available on YouTube and BitChute. We talk about how, in very basic philosophical terms, we have pathos, ethos, logos, and kairos. But I use pathos here to say that our emotional reaction, our first impression is often, not always, that things are happening due to hatred. But in this case, we have a situation where criticism is seen as so negative that it's a form of hate. And so when not everyone gets a trophy, you say, well, criticism's hate, and so hate is why I didn't get that trophy. There's something about me that they just don't like. That's the first impression of some people. Notably, if they're a victim from the start. They start with that phrase, I'm a victim. From the very beginning, you're starting from, the low ground. You don't have the high ground for the high ground maneuver. Fans of Star Wars Episode 3, Revenge of the Sith, might remember. You really want to have the high ground, and it can be tough if you place yourself on the low ground. Anakin Skywalker can let you know all about that. But you place yourself on this high ground. Hate is why this is happening. Hate is why I'm a victim, and I'm not used to criticism. Hate is why I didn't get the trophy. So what they do is then they disassociate from it. They disassociate from the hate. They don't want to be involved. We don't want to be involved with hate. We want to be involved with love. And we're insulated. We're used to a certain culture of nice, a certain safe space echo chamber where we are infantilized, essentially. Infantilized. We see ourselves as victims, and because we see ourselves as victims in this scenario, others will see us that way too. They will accept the frame that we have placed for ourselves, because if we believe it, of course, it's easier for them to believe it. And of course, if they're doing their due diligence as a family member or friend, they might say, hey, you're bigger than this. You're no victim. You're a winner. Get back out there, champ, and make things happen. That's what a very motivational or optimistic friend or family member might do. So the ethos part, when you go pathos, hate is why, then ethos, I'm disassociating. I'm setting moral boundaries, I'm setting ethical boundaries, and I am pushing away from this hate. I am putting myself in the good group, not the hate group. And of course, when you put yourself into a group, if that group is the oppressor group, where they're being hateful, they're being too critical, they're going too far, the opposite of that group, of course, is the oppressed. We are oppressed. I'm a victim. We are the oppressed. This is our identity. This is our association. This is our group. And that's kind of what we do as human beings. We get into this tribal mentality, this either-or mentality. It's really hard to stay away from that. Like, I like to circle the middle. I like to try to be a little bit on both sides of any given question. Hear them both out. It's the ideal. It's not always practical, and it's not always realistic to do that. Sometimes you do want to come down on one side or another, but I try to listen. But they get into this association that they are the oppressed. I'm in an oppressed group. And of course, if they follow the modern religion of social justice, of course, that makes it a whole lot easier. We've already got them labeled. And depending on what country you're in or what your situation is, what your immutable characteristics are, and how you relate, you're either in one group or another. This is what collectivism is all about. Tribal mentality is all about. I have a new video out, Grouping Thoughts. Check it out on BitChute for more on that. But finally, once a person is in that group, we are the oppressed. We identify as oppressed. They want to expand that group. And they want other people. People, again, we are windows to the world. We are windows to other people. Artists, especially, create a window for you to look through and see through the artist's eyes. See how they have an impression of the world and how they view it. So, at the end, you have projection. At the end of the final step of Infantilization Engine is projection. I'm a victim, and therefore, you're a victim. If you're like me, And I see myself in you. I see myself in everyone, but I especially see myself in other victims. So what we see is people, the crux of this, and I've been a little bit long-winded on this tweet, is that when we identify as a victim, we do want to expand our group. We want to expand. It's almost like a biological imperative, an impulse to grow, to replicate, and for us to survive. And so, even though we may see ourselves, and again, I don't advocate that we do see ourselves as victims. I think that we should focus on becoming more based, which means to not give a shit about what anybody else thinks or says of us, and kind of go our own way and do our own thing. And of course, work within the boundaries of acceptable society where people are, happy with us to some degree. We don't want to become completely nihilistic and misanthropic, but we do want to stand our ground, have our own value system, and not just go along with the pack. At least that's what I advocate on this channel. But if you're projecting, if you're a victim, if you see yourself as a victim, if I saw myself, I would project what I feel on others, because I would imagine, well, empathy, sympathy, and empathy, I feel what others do. And this is projection in itself. But we're talking about a specific scenario here. You're a victim. And I want to help you. It's not because I see you as a victim, not because I don't like you, not that I see you as a loser. I see myself as a loser. I see myself. And I see myself in you. And what it does is spread this mentality of, well, we're all weak, so we have to collectivize. We have to get together. And, to me, it's inward looking. It's not outward looking. It's not a growth mentality. It's I'm small, therefore let's create a larger form out of more smallness, where we should be lifting ourselves up. We should be trying to become bigger in ourselves. So ultimately, infantilization breeds more infantilization, and ultimately, nobody feels empowered. Nobody can really stand up for themselves. They have to rely on the group to come together and basically brigade others. And so there's a lot to unpack here, but it begins and ends with I'm a victim, you're a victim. And frankly, if we step aside from the infantilization engine and we don't consider ourselves the victim, we look at ourselves as a player in the game. We look at ourselves as someone with merit that may have come upon hard times, but we have a bright future. That's the kind of messaging that I like to promote here. So I'm not trying to judge. If you see yourself as a victim, I want you to know I believe in you. I think that a lot of people have had a hard time in their lives. It's been out of their hands since they were children, that their parents may have abused them, their teachers, their brothers and sisters, family, friends, and perhaps society at large, perhaps the government, perhaps other forces came and didn't give them a fair shake in life. And so they have a perpetual victim mentality. But I'm here to say that I believe in you. That's why I say all this stuff. I believe in everybody. And I don't think that it's good in the long term to see ourselves as victims. I think if we start to engage and to realize we only got one shot on this earth, we have one chance, one long chance to get it right and to find self-actualization, to find happiness and prosperity. And we have to roll with the punches, but we can't stay victims forever. Eventually, we have to push into the wider world and fight and overcome that mentality. So, a friend of mine we're not personal friends, but we've certainly corresponded, Zuby, at Zuby Music on Twitter, talks about victim mentality a lot. And because we get a lot of messaging, this is counter-programming, by the way. this channel is counter-programming to a lot of the stuff you're hearing in the media, where they talk about privilege and people that have been, institutional racism and things like that. You're being held back because people are racist. Some of it's true and some of it's false. But I like to, and of course institutional sexism as well, but I like to say, don't see yourself as a victim. It's a self-fulfilling prophecy. We believe in you. And you should too.